Hello and welcome. Let's begin with the latest that is unfolding in the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. The United States has ordered family members of its embassy staff in Ukraine to leave the country. The decision comes due to the ongoing threat of Russia's military action. Washington has also authorized the voluntary departure of its non-essential embassy staff. Other U.S. nationals in eastern Ukraine have also been advised to leave, saying it will not be in a position to evacuate them after any possible incursion by Moscow. The U.S. has also advised its citizens against traveling to Russia, particularly to areas on its border with Ukraine, warning that Americans could face harassment. Ukraine has said that the U.S. move to evacuate families of its diplomatic staff is premature. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said in a statement that the step taken by the United States is a display of excessive caution. The European Union has no plans to withdraw diplomats' families from Ukraine at the moment. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has said that after Washington announced such a move, pointing out a military attack by Russia could come at any time. Meanwhile, Britain's foreign ministry has said that it was withdrawing some staff and their relatives from its embassy in Ukraine in response to the growing threat from Russia. The embassy will remain open for essential work. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that there will be a united response by NATO allies against potential Russian aggression in Ukraine. The statement comes after a week of high-level diplomatic visits, which involved a trip to Berlin and Geneva.
First, we've been very clear that if there is any further Russian aggression in terms of sending Russian forces into Ukraine, there will be a swift, there will be a severe, and there will be a united response.
Blinken has rebuffed calls to immediately impose economic sanctions on Russia. He says that doing so would undercut the West's ability to deter potential Russian aggression against Ukraine. Blinken added that if one more Russian force entered Ukraine in an aggressive manner, it would trigger a significant response. Meanwhile, the UK's Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab told Sky News that Russia will face severe economic sanctions if it installs a puppet regime in Ukraine.
I think the important point to note in all of this is it's building up slowly. I think President Putin and Moscow have had this habit of trying to take advantage of opportunities when the world's attention is perhaps elsewhere. And the Foreign Secretary is quite rightly pointing to the designs that Russia has. And we're saying really two things. First of all, Ukraine is a free country. Under international law, it should decide its own fate. We will support them in defending themselves. But also to the international community, European, NATO allies, the US, we're standing shoulder to shoulder, saying there will be very serious consequences if Russia takes this move to try and invade, but also install a puppet regime.
Yesterday, the UK accused Russia of being in contact with a number of former Ukrainian politicians to allegedly plan an invasion. Russia dismissed the accusations and called it disinformation. Ukraine's ambassador to the UK has said that he was not surprised by the UK's allegations against Russia.
In Russian invasion, so they will invade and they will have to establish some sort of government. So I'm not actually surprised. I believe Putin sees himself in the history books, but the question is what he wanted to be written there, that he reunited the Soviet Union back, which he believed was the global geopolitical catastrophe when it collapsed. We believe that he can be somebody who would probably find a peace with the Russians themselves and will take care of Russians because they have to, to be taken care better than they are now.
The former Ukrainian lawmaker Yevhen Murayev is one of the 5 individuals accused by the UK for having links with Russia. Murayev has mockingly denied these allegations.
Моя позиция очень, я думаю, не нравится Великобритании, Соединенным Штатам, как и России, санкции которой я, в общем-то, имею с 1 ноября 2018 года. Это, наверное, Великобритании как-то забыли или упустили. Или просто даже не оценили. Да? И угроза обороноспособности Российской Федерации после конфликта с Медведчуком. Он попытался выйти в мою партию, и мне пришлось из нее выйти, потому что, я вижу другой путь развития Украины.
Ukraine has vowed to counter destabilizing Russian influence over the country's political and economic spheres. The allegations leveled by the UK are only adding to tensions between Russia and the West. London has said that there is evidence that many former Ukrainian politicians had maintained links with Russia. Some were allegedly involved in planning for an attack on Ukraine. Joining us live from Moscow for more on this story is Stuart Smith. Stuart, thank you for your time. Now, there is a growing sense of looming Russian invasion into Ukraine. The US has ordered its embassy staff families to leave, while the Western officials are meeting today in a bid to coordinate their response and to compile a battery of sanctions against Moscow. What's the latest that you are gathering from the Kremlin?
Well, from the Kremlin, all of this is a huge overreaction to a threat that it says does not exist and will not exist. Let's be clear, the Kremlin most recently announced once again that the claims Russia is imminently about to invade Ukraine are empty and unfounded escalation of what is tension created by the West in its sending of support, military support in terms of equipment, economic support in terms of funds, and political support in terms of statements to Ukraine. The Kremlin sees all of this as a situation which is being made worse by these comments from foreign governments, the United States included, about the situation. And we're also seeing an interesting divergence where Ukraine is now frequently downplaying the risk, saying that nothing has materially changed in 8 years. Russia's always been a threat and they have been at war with Russia for that time, and calling the US and UK's departure of certain the families of diplomatic staff and some diplomats on a voluntary basis premature. That's in contrast to what the UK said at the weekend regarding this intelligence report that Russia is planning to change the government in Kyiv, and also what the United States is doing with reports that Joe Biden is considering not sending troops to Ukraine, to be clear, but potentially sending a few thousand troops to NATO member states close to Russia. So on one side we have quite the escalation in rhetoric and planning, and the EU foreign ministers are in Brussels today to talk further about how the European Union countries would respond should Russia invade Ukraine.
And Stuart, touching on one thing that you mentioned, the UK government has accused Russia of trying to install a pro-Russian government in Kiev. Now, after which Ukraine has vowed to counter the destabilizing Russian influence. How are these claims adding to the tensions between Russia and the West?
Yeah, so Russia's quite clear that in all of this, it has no intention to invade, and yet these claims from UK intelligence are being seen not welcomed by everybody as potentially a solid analysis of what's going on in Ukraine. There is some confusion and uncertainty as to what extent a ex-politician who, although does hold certain views different to the Ukrainian government in how he perceives Russia, he considers the threat from Russia to be of NATO's making, with destabilization, with this military support. But he is also a person that is sanctioned by Russia, and so he poured cold water on the idea that he had anything to do with creating any sort of Russian-controlled government in Kiev. And there hasn't been much response from the other NATO countries as well to these specific allegations. We know that the US, in terms of intelligence reports, is concerned that an invasion is imminent, but we haven't heard anything from the United States on a change of government in Kiev. Certainly the focus by Secretary of State Antony Blinken is the chance for imminent invasion, not necessarily for an imminent change of governance in Ukraine.
All right, Stuart, thank you very much for being with us on this broadcast and all those valuable insights there.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.